Melissa K Norris is a fifth-generation homesteader, a mother, an author, a podcaster, and an incredible wealth of experience and information on how to thrive living close to the land. I learnt so much from this interview Andrea did with her. Listen in and you'll hear an invaluable insider look into her farm routine and life, how she prepares her family's food for the whole week on a Sunday, her hard and fast rules for her kids and food, her insight into the many ways to earn income from your farm, and I promise you there'll be ones in there that you've never thought of, and how she does it all, including being able to look like she hasn't just come off a farm when she actually has. This interview is chock full of gems that'll fill out your knowledge, make your life easier, and make you smile.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Allison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to introduce to you a very special friend and also somebody who's been a mentor for me, even though she didn't know me for many years through her books and channels. Today, Allison isn't here, but I have Melissa K Norris on the podcast. Hello, Melissa. Welcome.
Hey, Andrea. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm super stoked that you said yes. This is tons of fun for us. If anybody listening doesn't know who you are, they're about to find out. But Melissa K Norris is the person that Chuck Norris took his name from. That's how cool she is.
Okay, I am stealing that. I love that. It's so much fun, even though it's, obviously my married last name. That is hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, Chuck Norris wishes he was as cool as Melissa K Norris. So Melissa, you have YouTube channel, Instagram, cookbooks. What else do you have out there? Oh, your podcast, obviously. Your amazing podcast.
Oh, you're so fun. Yeah, I'm actually trying to go through the list. There is a lot. The Pioneer Today podcast, Instagram, Facebook page, Pinterest, and the YouTube channel are kind of the prime. Well, and my website, of course. Like that is the main hub. But yeah.
Can you say your website?
melissaknorris.com.
What? Yeah, I love it. Yeah, your stuff is so good. I think I told you that Lexi said of all the gardening books that she has, yours is in the top 2. She's got her 2 favorites, and yours has been very helpful for her. So,
oh well, I feel very honored. That's always it's like it's funny as the author. That's your goal, but until it goes out in the world, you're not sure if you actually met that standard or that goal that you set. So I love hearing that.
Yeah. I'd say you did. And when we get towards the end, I really want to ask you about your new book that's coming out. So,
okay.
So let's kick this off. I've collected questions for you. Your fans want to know. We've got your first question that we always start off on the podcast is, what is the last thing you ate before jumping on to record?
Okay.
Can you go upstairs? Or hop down for just a minute. All right, fire it well.
Okay. The last thing, technically, espresso with cream is my go-to every morning. I'm really not a big breakfast eater. I never have been. Even as a kid, I was never really that into breakfast. I just naturally intermittent fast. So yeah, coffee with cream is what you will find in my hand every single morning.
I like the mug you had. It looks like a pottery or something like that.
It is actually. It is available at melissaknorris.com. It says
Really?
Pioneering Today. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a Melissa K Norris mug. Stop it! I need one.
I'll have to bring you one now.
says pineapple. You have to sign it with a Sharpie.
I would
That's my
totally
name
do that.
today.
Yes, I
Oh
know. I
my
love it. They are
gosh.
hand. Actually, it's really funny. They're my favorite mugs, not because they have my
Mhm.
branding on them, but
Well,
they are actually handmade. So they're
oh,
handmade,
I
real
love it.
pottery, and I love those types of things. But I like the
What?
shape of it. Like it just fits
Hmm.
your hand. And I always have cold
I
hands,
know.
and it's
Yeah.
like it's my hand warmer as well
Yeah.
as my energy increaser.
Yeah. Gets the chores done. So speaking of coffee, one of the questions that somebody had was, do you brew anything? This is just a random question, but as soon as he asked, I was like, I have no idea. Do you brew anything out there on the farm, like beers and things like that?
That's a great question. The only thing I brew is vinegar, which technically means I've
Mm.
brewed alcohol and then I've turned it into or it turns itself into vinegar, I should say.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't. But no, it's really funny. I detest beer.
Really?
I don't like the flavor. I have tried,
Uh-huh.
everybody's like, "Oh, you got to try this one." Like that whole thing. And I just really do not like the flavor of beer. And
Yeah.
so it's never held any interest for me just because I don't like it. And we
Yeah.
actually have wine grapes because by accident we got wine grapes for half of our grapes when we put them in way back in the day.
Oh,
And so
fun.
I use those to make like jelly because they never get sweet enough to just eat. And so I use those to make like
Oh,
grape
okay.
juice where you're adding some sweetener to it, or jelly, which you would be adding obviously sugar to. Anyhow, you have to because they're so sour. But I would
Oh,
like to someday learn to do some winemaking, but it's just not on the top of my bucket list. I haven't dove into
yeah.
it yet. So yeah,
Yeah.
technically no, just the vinegar, but I don't know that that's really technically the brew you were
Yeah.
asking about.
No, I think that's totally do you pH test your vinegar or do you just use it for cooking or whatever?
I don't use it for canning because
Mhm.
it's the raw vinegar, and if you use it for
Yeah.
canning, of course you destroy those properties. But also because of the
Yeah.
pH levels, just as you
Yeah.
were saying, and from the research that I've done for canning, the pH strips are not accurate
No.
enough,
I
and
think they're so
yeah.
subjective.
So I don't. So all of the vinegar that we brew is for like fire cider, medicinal purposes,
Yeah. Yeah.
cooking, just in
Yeah.
eating those types of things. Yeah, and
Yeah,
fruit
unless
fly traps. I have to say, fruit flies are horrible right now, and
yeah, they
so they are my
are
fruit fly
so bad.
killers. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like unless you are making tons and tons and tons of vinegar and testing it on a digital meter, um, I would just get it from Azure for canning because yeah, all that effort and then you're just gonna cook it. Okay.
Yeah, same. That's where actually it's hilarious. That's where I get mine is from Azure because
Yeah.
they have got, they're one of the few places I can find when I want white vinegar, which I usually use apple cider
Mm,
vinegar for so many things. But when I'm canning, I do like the white vinegar, but Azure is one of the only
yeah.
places that I can find the organic white vinegar because it's
Oh
usually
yeah.
made from corn. And if it's not organic, I don't really want GMO corn
Uh-uh.
vinegar personally. So
I don't
anyways,
think I've seen white vinegar anywhere but on Azure actually. Because
that's
there's been a couple
organic.
of
Yeah.
times I've thought, oh, I just need to buy some quick and I never could find any. So
Yeah. Same.
yeah, weird. Um, okay, another random farm question before we're gonna get to the bulk of what I have for you, which is you live relatively close to me. How do you keep your chickens warm in the winter? What's your strategy?
Oh, that's a good question. They're made to stay warm. I mean, they've survived for the beginning of time, right? Since the chicken came from the egg or the egg came from the chicken, whichever. And so we just do a deep litter in the coop. So I add extra straw for them. And, as long as you've got at least a few chickens so that they can kind of roost
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
they've got body heat. And mainly it's just that they have a place to be dry and a place
Mhm.
to block the wind.
Okay.
But I don't use heat lamps. I don't use any lighting, any heat sources. And they've always done just fine. Like last winter we had the coldest temps that I have seen here, and I've lived here for 41 years because I've lived the same place my whole life. And
Awesome.
we were 5 degrees. I've never seen us get into
Yeah.
negatives. Like with wind chill, yes, but not the actual
Yeah.
temperature. And they all just did fine. They did great.
Yeah. We had 5 degrees this past winter. I
Yeah.
think I'm slightly higher than you. So it probably gets like a little bit colder here. So I don't know if you guys are at 5 degrees this past winter or not. But yeah, that was the coldest it got. I don't think it ever dipped into the negatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just extra, I put in I put extra straw in so that
Hmm.
they can get down in there and they've got that deep litter.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, they've always done great.
Do you have your eggs freeze? Do your eggs freeze in the winter?
I have had the eggs freeze, but most of my girls, unless I have a new flock that it's their first year laying,
Mhm.
they're not usually laying at our coldest part of the year because they usually don't
Okay.
start laying again until the days are longer, which is usually about the end of February. And we'll have some
Yeah.
cold temps in March and like some late snowstorms, but it's usually not quite those cold temps of like January.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have had some eggs freeze, but I'm kind of the belief like they crack when they freeze, but as
Yeah.
long as they were frozen, like nothing got in there. And so
Yeah.
if once as soon as they thaw, like if I'm going to use them that day,
Yeah.
like I'll go ahead and use them. If
Yeah.
if there's too many and I'm not going to be able to use them, I don't let them want them sit cracked for a long
True.
period of time. But that's just kind of the way I roll with that.
Yeah. And you're not using them in like eggnog or maybe something raw, but if you're cooking them, you know.
Yeah.
Plus, when you're getting so few eggs in the winter, you just don't want to waste a single one.
Yeah. So I'll try to be really good and go out like super early, like right
Yes.
when they've just laid it and grab them. And that does work sometimes if I'm out
Yeah.
there. I'm not always that in the morning though, because it's so cold and I don't want to go
I
out quite that
know.
early. Yeah. So
So for anybody listening who doesn't know how Western Washington is, it gets like our days get pretty short as far as not being in Canada or Greenland or Alaska goes. Our days are as short as 8 hours in the winter, 8 hours of daylight. Um so but our summer days, the sun's up at 4 and it goes down, it's light out till 10. So
till 10. Yeah.
we get that. Okay, I feel like I have now that I have you here, we're not standing in like a parking lot talking. So I feel like I have so many
We
questions.
have parking lot meetings a lot. It sounds weird, but it's actually cool.
We've only had the cops show up once. Um, do you preserve eggs? Do you preserve your
I do
eggs?
preserve eggs.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell us about that.
So before I had a freeze dryer, I tried different methods. And honestly, like they will last. Like I will start gathering like in the month of October when I know that they're getting
Hmm.
ready to molt and I'm going to start losing my egg production.
Yeah.
Those I will gather and I just put them immediately in the fridge with the bloom still on, unwashed, so that
Oh,
they've got the bloom.
okay.
And those eggs will last, as long as we don't obviously get into them, those will last at least 3 months.
Oh yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just like we'll try actually about mid-September I'll start gathering those eggs and then just not using those, putting them back. And then I will freeze for baking, especially Christmas baking, because that tends to be like when I've gathered from September, by the time we hit
Right.
December, I've went through all of them.
Hmm.
And so I will freeze eggs, but for me, with freezing the eggs, you have to incorporate the yolk. If you just crack an egg and freeze it without incorporating the yolk with the white, it, I tried it and because I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. I'll just whip it with my
Yeah.
KitchenAid, like whip that yolk. No, no,
What
no, no, no.
happens?
Once it thaws, it's rubbery and it doesn't
Ew.
matter. It's weird. Even like once you cook it, it doesn't matter. Like I've
Gross.
tried beating it, with the KitchenAid beater on like 10 speed, and that thing can whip.
Yeah.
And in a batter, and then like thinking it's incorporated within a batter, I've beat this thing.
Mhm.
No, you will actually taste like little rubbery chunks, and whenever you
Oh,
bake, it's
no
it's
way.
so yeah, so appetizing.
So
So
appealing.
I learned that if I incorporated fully, just like with a fork, just whip that baby, and then freeze it, then it's fine. Of course, then it's only using it in
Mhm.
in recipes like baking where you're going to be putting a whole egg in, or you could do
Mhm.
scrambled eggs with them, of course. But
Yeah.
you're not going to get the whites for meringue or
Yeah.
or anything like that. But that has worked well. And what I like to do is just put one egg in a muffin tin, and I use the silicone muffin liners,
Mhm.
and whip it in there, and then put it in there, and then freeze it. And then when I
Nice.
go to pull it out, I know this is one
How many it
egg.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that I've
Yeah.
got and I just put them all in like a big gallon Ziploc bag and freeze them.
Yeah.
So that I did, and anybody can do that if you've got a freezer, obviously. But I got my freeze dryer almost 3 years ago now, and what I love about the freeze dryer is I can freeze dry them raw And then because you can't dehydrate raw eggs, well, you shouldn't. There's safety
Ew.
issues with bacteria with dehydrating. And
This
so
is a
you can,
long time to be at like 90 degrees, right?
yeah. So there's just a higher bacteria load, so
Yeah.
it's not recommended. You can dehydrate with a regular dehydrator cooked eggs, but of course then you can't use them for baking. Like you're just reconstituting to eat them, and so that
Yeah.
for me that defeated the purpose because I really wanted them for baking come the winter months. So with the freeze dryer though, because it uses different mechanisms, you can safely freeze dry raw eggs, and textural wise,
Okay.
like I actually don't even deep freeze my eggs anymore because textural wise, if I'm going to make scrambled eggs, the freeze dried eggs, you can't tell the difference. Like they're light
What?
and fluffy. It's just like a fresh egg. I know
What?
it's weird and cool all at the same time. And then I've got extra freezer space because my freezer space is really like my premium spot. I don't have a lot of extra freezer space because we butcher all our own
Yeah.
pigs and our own cows and our own chickens, so there's only so many
Yeah.
freezers that I can have running, and I don't like to use them for things if I can safely preserve them in other methods that are just as good.
Yes. Okay. One of my friends got a freeze dryer and she took some of my eggs and freeze dried a bunch and gave me back a quart jar. So I have this jar. It's like yellow, it looked like gold flake or
Yep.
something. So you just
So
put it in the
two
water?
tablespoons of the dried egg freeze dried powder to 2
Okay.
tablespoons water is approximate
What?
1 egg. Yeah.
What? And you just soak that or what
Yeah,
do you do?
yeah. So take your 2 tablespoons of your egg powder, incorporate the 2 tablespoons of water, and just use like a fork to kind of moisten it, incorporate it up. Let
Mhm.
it sit for just like I don't know, not very long, like maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then it'll reconstitute into the water and the powder will
Jeez.
reconstitute, and then yeah, you're good to go. It's really cool.
I have
I
to try
know.
it.
Well, it's so nice because I can fit like 18 eggs per tray in the freeze dryer,
Yeah.
and there's 4 trays, and then that all condenses down to like maybe 2 half-gallon jars. But I mean, that's I don't
Yeah.
I can't I'm not going to do the math on the fly, but that's a lot of dozen eggs condensed
That's
to
a lot
just
of
one
eggs.
little jar. So
Yeah.
storage wise, it's phenomenal.
No, totally. We don't have a freeze dryer. I don't even know how our neighbors have a freeze dryer and they're off grid like we are. So when she said she has a freeze dryer, I was like, hold up, how are you running a freeze dryer? That baby pulls a lot of power. And so then she was telling me about their setup and stuff. So goals. But what I've been doing is just putting them in the calcium hydroxide and it works. But boy, it takes up a lot of room because
Yeah,
you just have gallon jars of eggs.
and that was where we were at. The reason I haven't done that is because I didn't have the space for it. We just added on to our
Yeah.
manufactured home. It's a double wide, but manufactured home
Hmm.
sounds fancier. And so I now have an office space, and I actually have like a walk-in pantry where the freeze dryer now is, because prior to that I had to keep my
Ah.
freeze dryer out in an outside shed, which means I couldn't run it when we had freezing temperatures unless I also wanted to run a heater at the
Oh.
same time, which I didn't really, because the
Then
oil,
you
if the
wanna
oil
blow the
gets,
power on the
yeah,
property.
I'm like, no, thanks. So now I have that, but that was the thing. I'm like, I didn't have a garage. We didn't have a basement. I didn't have anywhere that I could have buckets of eggs or large gallon jars with the solution. I just didn't have the
Yeah.
space for it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. I feel like that's always what it comes down to with food preservation methods. I know people who they just have to dehydrate tons of stuff because they don't have a lot of room, but then you're probably like us where people say, I don't have room for something. And you're like, okay, but have you considered your bedroom? We've got like stacks of jars everywhere. And
Oh yes, under the bed. I'm like that.
yeah.
Yeah, under the beds, and we actually took what was supposed to be the coat closet when you enter the house, and the cleaning
Hmm.
closet, like where you would typically put your broom and vacuum and all those things, and that got converted. We went all the way up to the ceiling with shelves and around the side, and that was my
Yeah.
my extra
Yeah.
pantry and where I could put things. But then we started to outgrow that as well, and so then it was all in the bedroom, and I put you get them. They're like, I think they're like almost 6 foot tall wire
Hmm.
shelving units that you would typically see like
Yes.
in garages. Well, we had to put one of
Yep.
those in our bedroom because again, I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, this is
Yeah.
just silly. Like we need to add on an actual food storage rooms, and we were at a place where we could
Yeah.
do that. So it was
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I love it.
I remember Lexi telling me, oh yeah, I go around to the different bedrooms and pull out the bins under all the kids' beds. There's squash in this one and jam in this one. Yeah, yeah. It's surprising where you can stuff things, but also that's kind of traditional in a way, the way we recreate, like you've got your herbs hanging behind you, I see. Like the way we recreate the cool look is, we hang a ham from the ceiling and braid our garlic. And so, well, yeah, because you're not braiding your garlic.
Oh, I braid my garlic.
Oh, I thought you said, I'm not braiding this or something.
Oh, no. Well, I don't braid the hard neck because you can't. And
Yeah.
it was one of those things.
Okay.
Apparently, I am like a skeptic at heart, I guess, because I always try to test these things. And so the first time we grew the hard neck garlic, people would say, oh, you can't braid that kind. And I'm like, oh, watch
Can
me.
you though?
And no, you cannot. You cannot braid it. So they were right.
I'll just take your word for it. Well, I don't know. It just, it looks kind of cool. People always just had food stacked everywhere because if you had food. I remember reading, what was her name? She wrote the book Serve the People. It was about food in China. And she said that when you go to the houses in winter, like every window was just piled with cabbages because that was how they kept it in this one region. Okay, so let me hit you with some farm business questions, if I may.
You may.
Okay, so Melissa, for anyone who doesn't know, is a beautiful, successful woman with a gorgeous farm, which you can go see on YouTube, and a family, and you raise a lot of food, and you write amazing books, and you garden.
Okay, you just get to come with me everywhere. Like, so good for the ego. Just putting it out there.
What I'm trying to say is Melissa's goals for a lot of us. Also, this is what I really don't get. Whenever you meet me in town, you look so nice. Like you're clean, your clothes are clean. How do you do it? Tell me about that part.
Okay, this is going to sound really funny. So growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And what's funny is like, I knew that like, I would ask for things and my parents would say like, no, we don't have enough money for that. But I didn't really realize, this sounds so funny to say. I didn't realize how poor we were until I was older.
Wow.
Like my mom sewed my clothes when I was little and I just thought she liked to sew. No, because back then, oh Lord, I sound ancient. I am 41, but back then it was cheaper to sew your clothes than it was to buy store-bought. Now, with the price of fabric and zippers and notions and stuff, that's not always the case. And we have, unfortunately, much cheaper clothing. And I say unfortunately because that actually causes a lot more issues beyond just the pocketbook and you buying cheap clothing. But anyhow, so I didn't have a lot of clothes. And so there was your school clothes and you had your church clothes. And so as soon as you came home from school or from church, you immediately changed into your play or farm clothes. And so I've really kept that designation of clothing.
I love that.
So I have my clothes that I wear. That they're not school clothes anymore. They're to town clothes or to church clothes, that type of thing. And so they're just set aside. And so I have like what I wear on the farm in a normal day. And then I've got what you would go to town in. And so I guess it was just, it's really true. Like your formative years, they're called that for a reason. And so that is always stuck with me. So that's really funny. Yeah.
But it's true. It's true. I remember getting in so much trouble as a kid if we went outside came home from church and went right outside. But I didn't like wearing the fancy dress up clothes. So I'd come home, I was like instantly changing. My brothers would always go outside. Why are you outside in your church pants?
Yes.
Okay, now you made me think of another question that I didn't have before. You have a farm and you go to church and the chores and everything like that. Do you do it like really early before you go? How do you make that work? Because church is usually in the morning, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, our church starts at 10, but I'm on the praise and worship team, so technically I'm supposed to be there at 9:30, and they really love me, and I usually roll in about 9:45. So they're sweet, and they have my mic already set up for me because they just know.
That's awesome.
Anyways, true confessions. So the way that we run the farm is So my husband and I have been married for 23 plus years. We just had our 23rd year anniversary. And of those years, my husband still works a day job offsite. So he commutes 30 some miles a day, Monday through Thursday, to his day job. And for 18 of those years, I haven't worked at the pharmacy for going on 4 years now. But for the first 18 years of us homesteading, I also worked off the farm. And so we both were going to day jobs, and we were actually driving in opposite directions from one another.
Oh my gosh.
Our farm was kind of in the middle, and we both drove to neighboring towns for our day jobs. So we had to have systems in place in order to still be able to farm and to raise as much of our own food as we possibly could, that we were gone during the day. And so I generally don't do chores before church. Or if I do, it's very little. So like with all the poultry, like I have large enough feeders that I can fill them up and they'll have food for at least 2 days. So then I can time that so that everybody's getting filled up and fed Saturday, and I'm not dealing with it Sunday, and vice versa. Or I can go in and top it off if I need to, like, I fed yesterday, but I need to not the next day, type of a thing. So we've done that automatic waterers for, especially the large livestock. So for the pigs, we don't have pigs at the moment, and the cattle. And then we feed for the cows the big round bales. So even in the winter months, we're not feeding them every day. And so we kind of my husband has that time. So he knows, Monday. So Sunday he feeds a new bale. So then Monday, the first day of his work week, he's not having to go out to. And depending upon how many cows we have, how severe the weather is, etc., putting down that round bale on Sunday will take them through at least until Tuesday or Wednesday. So sometimes in the middle of winter, he is having to put out another bale, which of course, by the time he gets home, when he leaves in the morning, it's dark. And by the time he gets home, it's dark. So we're doing it in the dark with flashlights and headlamps and everything. But, that's just 1 day a week versus if you were having to try to feed in the dark 4 days a week when it comes to the cows. So we really have tried to systematize that as much as possible. Of course, when it's really severe weather, I am having to take out the chicken waters is the one for the chicken tractors that I don't have down with an automatic watering system that will keep it from freezing. So that's the one time when we have the really cold weather in the winter, even on church mornings, I bring the waterers in at night and then take them back out in the morning so that they've got, fresh water in the morning, and then we kind of rotate throughout the day. But aside from that, I'm usually not doing the chores Sunday morning.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
I love that. I like hearing about the systems because that was actually kind of segues me into what I wanted to ask you, which is not everybody listening has a farm or even wants a farm, but pretty much everybody listening wants to cook from scratch. Ironically, the title of one of your books. Everybody wants to cook from scratch. They want to make bread. They probably want to shop from local farms, all things that take more time than just buying Pop-Tarts at the grocery store. And a lot of people are also working either side hustle jobs they do at home or, like you said, actually driving to a workplace. So we all, the people, Melissa, we wanted to know about how you stop laughing.
Sorry, I'm trying to laugh quietly and it makes it worse.
Yeah, because then you run out of oxygen. We wanted to know about how you structure the chores, the work. I mean, you show us videos of here's me hauling a bale of hay, but obviously that takes more time than just hauling a bale of hay, to make the video and everything. So it's not like, making videos of doing farm chores short, it's not saving you time or anything. So we want to know, how do you run the business, the family, be a wife, and you're on the praise and worship team at church, and still have time to meet me in town and talk for an hour.
You're so funny. Really, it really is systems, which I know you're like, okay, well, great. Well, what does that actually mean?
No, but I love hearing that. That is helpful, but I do want to know what it means. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I really try to batch my time So whenever I'm doing certain tasks, be it business, be it farm, be it homestead, be it cooking, whatever, there's certain things that I like to try to do in batch, but then there's other things that I've come to realize if I just do a little bit of that every single day, I can always stay on top of it. If I miss days, then it becomes this huge thing. And one of those is laundry. Like living on a
Ugh.
farm, hallelujah,
Ugh.
you always got dirty clothes, like no
Always.
matter what. And so I do, for the size of my family, which is 2 teenage kids at the moment, who ironically, I swear, dirty up clothes almost as much as a newborn. I'm not quite sure how.
How is this happening?
I don't know. I'm like, okay, guys. So I do a load of laundry every single day. And for me, that means putting the load in, getting it dry. Right now, that's out on the clothesline. In the middle of winter, I do use a clothes dryer, and then fold it and put away. So what I would do when I was working, and I still do that because I am working from home, I'm not, but I am
Right.
actually in the home. So it goes in first thing in the morning, because usually if you are on the grid, I know Andrea is not, your power rates are cheaper. It costs you less to run your
What?
electronic things.
Didn't know that.
Non-peak hours. Yeah. So usually
Huh.
I think peak hours, I'd have to double check, but I think they're like from 8 a.m. to, like 8 or 9 p.m. at night or something like that.
Literally had no idea. Literally did not know that.
See, growing up in a frugal household, you learn these things because that was when my
Yeah.
mom timed everything. So, and it worked
That's a
great when
hot
I was
tip.
working outside the home because I could put a load of laundry in the morning before I left, like first thing in the morning. And so that way, if I needed to put it out on the line, I had time to get it out on the line before I left for work, because obviously it would need to be out to dry all day.
Right.
And then if not, I would have time to put it in the dryer, or if I didn't have time to put it in the dryer, as long as I put it in the dryer as soon as I got home, it wouldn't get the sour smell. Because if you leave clothes in the washing machine too long, you have to just
Stay in the
rewash them,
summer.
and defeated the whole purpose.
I
Which
don't
I've
know what
done
you're
a few
talking
times.
about, Melissa. I've never done that.
Never done that. Don't know
kind
what
of a
that means.
housekeeper are you?
Not a good one. So
You've never had to throw a load away before, have you? Because that's happened to me.
no, actually, I've never had to throw a load away before, but I have
That
had to
did
use
happen.
a little extra vinegar to get some smells.
I'm just saying, there was a load
Okay.
once that was
Well,
not
that makes me
redeemed.
feel better, actually. I will confess that when my children were small and I was nursing, the nursing pads that you would put in your bra.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
one time I didn't realize, somehow a bunch of those got at the bottom of the hamper, and I didn't realize
Oh,
it.
no.
And then like a long time later, I pulled them out and they had like all the colors of mold, like pink,
Oh.
yellow, like every color of the rainbow of mold. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
those got thrown out, but they weren't technically in the washing machine yet. So
Your
anyways.
fresh raw milk.
It was, and she
active.
turned. She was doing stuff. Anyways, she turned on
Oh
me.
my gosh.
But back to sorry, I'm like
Okay.
a squirrel. Back to
No,
it
the
hand.
laundry is very interesting. Like, 'cause this is
Yeah.
practical.
So wash it in the morning. It'd be dry by the evening. It gets folded. Everything is put away that night. So then the next
Yeah.
morning, you're not having, because a lot of times it's easy to get it. Well, it can be washed and dried, but then you have this pile of how many loads that need to be folded and put away, and then it becomes this thing. So that's kind of my
Oh,
rules.
yeah.
So laundry is done every day to stay
Okay.
on top of it. And then kind of the same thing. I try to do the same thing with the dishes as well. We don't have a dishwasher, so it's by hand. By choice, we did have a dishwasher, and we no longer do. So
Why?
same thing.
Wait, why? What happened? You just wanted the cupboard
Okay,
space? or-
so, well, a little bit of both. So living in a manufactured home, the plumbing that they put in double wides, at least ours was built in 2006. So they put in smaller circumference pipe. So it's like a half an inch smaller diameter than what you would put in a regular house.
Uh-huh.
And so, and
Oh.
at the angle that the pipes got put in, we had plumbing issues. And so my husband, after the second time, he's like, I am not going back under and redoing it and clogging all of these pipes again. Like, I'm just done. And
Oh, no.
we really were suspectful that it was the dishwasher that was causing a lot of the issues.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but if we don't have a dishwasher, I am not the sole dishwasher. Like, there's going to be some, like, I understand your frustration, but at the same time, we're not yanking out the dishwasher.
Yeah.
And then I am the one that is stuck doing all of the dishes. So this was 3 years ago now. I'm trying. Yeah, 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so everybody gets a dish night, and, everybody just has to help with the dishes because I'm
that's
not
a
being
good
the
way
one
to do
stuck
it.
with them. So it's worked pretty well. I mean, I will say that I still do the majority of the dishes. But when I'm like, I need a break, it's your dish night,
Yeah.
then they're pretty willing to jump in and grab it. I will say
Okay.
we had made that decision before we had a dairy cow. And so there are times when I have slightly thought about, maybe regretted that when I'm washing all of the glass gallon jars, every single day,
Yes.
and all of the milking
No.
equipment and cans and everything. And like, was this the smartest decision? Anyhow,
Was this?
yeah, I'm not sure. But so that's my other rules with the dishes.
So you do the
'cause
laundry every day. The dishes get done, obviously, constantly. Now I want to know what else you do every day and your
yeah,
other
so
everyday things.
that is that. And when the garden is in, I try to go out and make sure I am doing a little bit of weeding every day. Like, so I'm not doing those
Okay.
marathon. And we use a lot
Yeah.
more mulch and a lot more different permaculture practices now. So the weeding is not nearly what it used to be, even though the garden has expanded greatly over the decades and years since we've been here. But kind of just that maintenance too, like taking a look at the plants, like, oh, is anything looking diseased? Is there starting to be some type of bug infestation? Anything like that you can catch in its beginning stage, then you're likely to save the crop, and it's just easier to deal with. So I try to do like a little garden like walkthrough every day. Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's evening, that type of thing. And then I do check on the chickens and the cows. We do check on them once a day, even if waters are all the way full and all of that type of stuff, because systems can fail. You can have an automatic water that doesn't work anymore, or the hose can split, or just whatever. So I still do a visual eyes on everybody. But it's just a pretty quick, like, usually it's an evening walk type thing, just like a nice little break outside and do a quick walk through. But those are kind of my must do's every day. And then when it comes to cooking, Sunday is like my batch day. So Sunday is where, and this goes from back like when Monday was my work day and I wasn't home during the week. So I had to do a lot of stuff on Sunday. So Sunday is where I make up whatever's going to be for breakfast, because I don't cook breakfast in the mornings.
Wait, like for the whole week, you mean?
Monday through Thursday. So my husband is home Fridays, and my schedule changed a lot when I was working, but a lot of times I did have Fridays off too. And so I will make, and then so my husband leaves at like 5 something in the morning. Then the kids have different times that they're leaving for school. So nobody's like up and at the same time anyways. And I'm not getting up and cooking breakfast for 3 hours in the morning for different people's schedules. Just not going to happen. So I will do up, like for this past week, my son's like, Mom, can you make cinnamon rolls? And so cinnamon rolls is not normally what I give them for breakfast, every day of the week. But I'm like, sure, I haven't made cinnamon rolls for a long time because I don't do as much baking in the summer because it's hot. We don't have air conditioning in the house. So I made up a big pan of cinnamon rolls, and then same thing, like I made up a bunch of cookies. We sound like we're sugar addicts right now, but I made up cookies for the week because I knew like I'm not making dessert, and then the cookie jar will be full. And then I did up a bunch of yogurt. So then, there's options of yogurt for breakfast or snacks or whatever. So that, right there, breakfast was taken care of, dessert was taken care of. And snack stuff was taken care of. And then we've got a ton of fruit coming on. So there's like all those things for them to grab. So then it was dinner. And I always try to cook a large meal on Sunday and then plan out how I can use that to make either leftovers for the second night, ideally. So like big meal, like whole chicken, big baked roast Sunday dinner. Sunday night. Monday night is just straight on leftovers. And then Tuesday night, I took the leftovers from the chicken and made white sauce chicken enchiladas. And again, I made like a huge pan of it. And so that was Tuesday night. And then Wednesday is leftover chicken enchiladas. So really what I prepped on Sunday took us through the whole week. And I actually only had to cook one more night just to make the enchiladas from the leftover chicken. And then the next morning, I threw the chicken carcass in and made a whole bunch of broth in the Instant Pot, to can up because we were out of chicken broth. I don't know how that
Yeah.
happened, but
It
those
happens.
things do. It
When
happens.
you're
Yeah.
using it, it happens.
It happens. Yeah. So that's kind of like just kind of like strategy wise. Like I really like Sunday is like everything's going down Sunday to take
Yeah.
us through the next week. And then, we all have those meals like where if I didn't necessarily do it or we run short on time or whatever, like you've
Mhm.
got those meals that you can pull out of your pocket, how to make really
Yes.
quick, really fast, your kids like, so, sometimes that's when we'll do pancakes or,
Yeah.
we'll just
Thank
do a
you.
big old like breakfast, like eggs and toast and
Mhm.
bacon or whatever for dinner that night, or like tacos. Like I can thaw taco meat and have tacos like at
So fast.
almost an instant, so
Yeah.
like some of those
Yeah.
times we'll just pull those meals out if need be. But
I love that.
ideally, we've kind of meal prepped for the week and at least got that planned out for dinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know we have a Patreon for the listeners of the Ancestral Kitchen podcast? That's right, can't get enough of this? Well, there's more of it over on the Patreon feed, just waiting for you. We have a variety of levels to choose from and a bunch of different benefits to enjoy. Your sponsorship keeps the podcast on the air ad-free and helps us keep buying books to read and talk about on the podcast. It also helps Allison buy bizarre ingredients at the farmer's market so she can ferment them and tell us about them later. Check us out at patreon.com/ancestralkitchenpodcast.
No, that's so awesome. So that handles a huge portion of the week, the time, which is, spent in cooking. And then do the kids take lunches or do they like to get lunch at their school or
Yeah. They get lunch at school, which I always tell them you are more than welcome to take lunch from home. But I also with my kids I try to follow, the 80-20 rule where they're eating
Mhm.
good 80% of the time and then 20% of the time. I don't want to be so dogmatic that when they leave home, they're like, oh my gosh, I never got anything. And so then they
I'm
flip.
living on Twinkies now.
Right? Yeah. Because I've seen that
Yeah.
happen with people.
I have too. I have too.
And I also I don't want them to be, I don't want their food to become their religion, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I firmly believe that, I have a whole health story and turning back to whole foods because I had let convenience foods come too much into our life and whatnot, and had to have my upper stomach and esophagus biopsied for cancer. And it was a whole ordeal. And I was able to reverse that and get off prescription medications by completely removing, vegetable oil. I was cooking a
Oh
lot of
my
stuff
gosh.
still, but
Yeah.
was using canola oil to bake with. Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't, and this was years ago, but it, was. And so I feel like I really do know the power of good food and what it does to the body, and our food is our medicine and all of that. But at the same time, I don't want to be crippled by, oh my gosh, I can't eat this. Like it's
Mhm.
caused me so much anxiety because it's not the perfect whole food, whatnot. Like I haven't shared this publicly very, very often, but when I was in high school, I had an eating disorder. And so I've really had to work a hard way to come back from that. And I don't want whole foods and good eating to become a new eating disorder for myself. And nor
Mhm.
do I want that to be for anybody else, including my children. So I try to have balance, but tipping the scales in favor of
Yeah.
the good whole foods.
Yeah. That's good because I do think we can maybe pathologize food almost. And I agree, obviously, podcast is about eating good food.
Amen.
I agree with you. But I don't want to have a hernia if I see the kids eating something because then I don't know, it's almost like it's just going to make it more of a allure to them in a way. And they are drawn towards and repelled by the right things as far as I can tell. So I feel like their taste is pretty much on point. Um, but I think Ben Lynch was saying um, when his kids go to a friend's house and they say, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to eat, Doritos or something that would just make our mother heart stop." Like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Then he's like, "Okay." And you're like, Ben Lynch says that? And he goes, yeah, because then they come home and they have a bellyache. And they're like, I don't ever want to eat that again. And he's like, see, I let them learn on their own.
That has been really interesting because I have to say, I do have a couple of hard and fast rules. Like, I will not let the kids have Mountain Dew or
Oh,
Diet
no.
Cokes. Any diet
No,
sodas.
yeah.
Like, that is no. Like, and some,
Gross.
if they're out, like, I'll be like, okay, you can have a Sprite. I don't know why I'm like, you can have a Sprite or a 7-Up or a root beer. Like, it's special. Like when it's someone's birthday party and all they
Yeah,
have is soda.
yeah.
Like, no, you have to
Yeah.
just have water only. So I don't
Eat
know
the ice chips out of the cooler, kid.
No. I don't know why I made this distinction. Like, if you're gonna have a soda, I think because of the caffeine load, probably.
Maybe, and the
because-
dyes and things.
and all the dyes. Yeah.
I agree
Anyways,
with you. I've
But-
got my like lines. There's
yeah,
some
there's
lines.
some there's
just
some
can't
lines you're not allowed to do those. But what's really interesting is because now my kids are older too. I mean, my daughter's 13, my son's 17. They're in situations where I'm never there, and they're going to make their own food choices. Like but what's been interesting is they do begin to correlate. I don't
Uh-huh.
feel very well. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, what did you eat or drink today? And sometimes they just don't drink enough water. I'm like, oh, you have a headache? Well, have you had any water today? Oh, no. And they have water bottles anyways. It's a
Yeah.
whole thing. But they have correlated, like, especially my daughter is like, oh, my stomach doesn't feel very good. And I'm like, well, what all did you have today? And we'll kind of
Yeah.
walk through it. And I'll just ask her what you have today. And then she is like, lists it out.
Yeah.
And then she's like,
Oh.
oh, yeah.
That's really useful too, because I feel like a lot of people don't really even realize how bad the food is making them feel. They're just kind of used to feeling sort of crappy all the time. And if you eat canola oil every single day, you don't know how it feels when you eat canola oil because you've never not eaten it. So that's nice that you're having them observe it, because probably like you said, rather than giving them a disorder, they'll just go based on facts and information and what makes them feel good, which is a better
Yeah.
way
I mean,
to make
and
decisions.
even within healthy food, you can still have sensitivities. And so I think
Totally.
the biggest thing that I have probably learned is to actually pay attention to the cues your body is giving you, because my body was giving me cues that the foods I was eating were affecting me years
Uh-huh.
before I finally paid attention to them.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really like try that, like even with like good organic, all the
Yeah.
good things like dark chocolate,
Mhm.
that can still be a trigger food for me. Not all the time.
Wow.
And so I've had to really pay attention to, oh, why am I feeling like this? What have I eaten? So even with the kids, like if we start to notice a pattern, which is kind of also what I'm trying to help them to recognize on their own, like, okay, I have a headache and I get this headache every time I eat this food.
Mm.
Well, that might be something that's a sensitivity for you, so just kind of
Mhm.
making them aware. And my goal is that they would be in tune to their bodies much more than I was at a younger age, so that they can
Right.
make those correlations and then remove something if they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Allison and I are both trying to give that to our kids because, um, yeah, my mom cooked everything from scratch when I was a kid because there's 8 kids and processed food is pretty expensive. Or maybe it was like the clothes, like you said, it used to be cheaper to make your own clothes from scratch. And I don't know if, I don't really know what processed food like prices are right now, but I feel like it always seems more expensive than just a bag of wheat berries.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting
So,
because I've heard the argument like, well, it costs too much money to eat healthy food, but kind of the same thing. Like, look at how much you're paying for like a liter or whatever size soda pop, right?
I
They're like,
know.
what, $2? I don't know,
I
because
don't
I
know,
don't buy
but
them, but
expensive.
they
Yeah.
are. And I'm like, but they're looking at like this $2 thing, which seems $2 for a one-time sports drink, let's say, versus $8 for a gallon of milk. So 2
Yeah.
versus 8, that does
Right.
seem, but they're not taking into account the volume. Like
Yeah.
when you're getting a gallon of milk, not a little, soda drink. So
Yeah.
I think
Or
even
somebody will compare like an ultra processed milk to can you hear one of the kids is playing Duolingo upstairs? Can you hear that? Okay.
I can't.
Okay. But they'll compare it to the raw milk and they say, well, like the raw milk is so much more expensive. But they're not also comparing not just the volume, but what that thing is doing. The raw milk is literally healing you, and the ultra processed milk is making you more acidic and sucking calcium out of your bones. Like, big difference.
Oh, complete. Well, and even in that, like, this is where like I get so angry too, is people don't understand that although a lot of the reason that the processed food is sometimes cheaper is because of government subsidies. And so
Absolutely.
things that are like high fructose corn syrup and these corn
Yeah.
products, like with big farms, like the only reason they're cheaper is because the government is actually
Mhm.
making them cheaper.
They're not
Um,
actually cheaper.
they're not. And so it's created this false dichotomy within our whole food system on multiple layers, which this would be an entire another podcast episode. We don't have enough time for to get on this full soapbox, but
Let's do it.
it, but
Climb up.
it really makes me angry actually, because it's not the true cost of the food and people
No,
don't
it's not.
realize that, and it causes all these other issues. Yes, the health implications, the health
Mhm.
issues, but even for the farmers, and then where you've got farmers who aren't getting subsidized that are trying to farm and fair
Yeah.
wages, and
Oh, no.
it's a
I
big
know.
mess. It's just a
Yeah,
mess.
and then those farmers on those subsidized farms are basically slaves to their industry. They can't just pivot and say, you know what, the soy isn't doing so good anymore. I think I'm going to switch to something else. Like they are indentured and mortgaged and remortgaged and they can't get out. It is depressing, and that's where a lot of those really sad and hard farming stories come from. But yeah, I think when you say the true cost of food, people think, oh yeah, sure, of course, you're talking about that the food is gonna make me sick and whatever, but it's like not even that. Just literally the production cost is so obscured that we think we're buying cheap food and you've paid in taxes and your children will be paying in taxes and
Yeah.
ugh, so many things. Speaking of money, because that's fun. We were wondering if you could spit out a list for us of, and I know that the modern farm, there's a lot of monocrop farms, right? This like what we're just talking about. All you grow is soy, 50,000 acres of soy or whatever. But the small, nimble farms tend to be more diverse. Like this morning, we were just trying to make a list of all the things Melissa K Norris does. And
Oh,
wow, that's
gosh.
like a lot. Um, and that's the way that I see a lot of older farms being. Like when you read old diaries and books about older farms, I mean, just read Farmer Boy. They're selling thoroughbreds, they're selling butter, they're taking cows and pigs into town and selling them. They're husking corn, they're making, shingles. There's a diverse amount of skills and outputs and income sources and things like that. So makes a farm more resilient because then when there's a bad winter and there's no maple syrup, at least you still have butter to sell. When there's a bad spring and or you don't have good cows, then at least there's maple syrup to sell. So we were wondering if you could just generate for us a list of ways somebody on a farm could generate income if you have ideas for that.
Oh, girl. Yes. Okay.
Let's hear it.
Let's hear it. Okay. So obviously some of it's going to depend on the size of your farm and the acreage that you have, but not always necessarily. And the reason I say that is because
Okay.
my brother doesn't own any acreage and he has one of the largest cattle herds in eastern Skagit County that there is. And that's
What?
because he leases multiple fields from people. Usually it's older
Brilliant.
farmers or acreage that people don't want to get rid of because it's been in the family, but they don't farm it
Oh.
anymore. Like it's, old family farms basically. So that's why I say you're only limited by what you think you're limited by. And I know that
Amen.
feels like, oh, this like
Sister.
sky in the pie type thing to say, but it's really true because if you're like, no, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work, you will figure out a way to make it work. And if you're like, oh, no, I can't do this, then you're right, you can't. So
Yeah,
that
you're
being
right.
said, so obviously, livestock, and there's two ways for that. You can actually sell the finished product, meaning you're going to sell half a beef, quarter of a beef, full beef,
Uh-huh.
but it's it's been killed, butchered, cut and wrapped, right?
Right.
It's in the beef format.
Right.
Or you could actually sell and do a breeding program where you're selling live cattle. So you're selling off calves or you're selling off steers or whatever.
Yeah.
So when it comes to livestock, there's usually both, and sometimes people will do both of those options. That they get too many for what their field can handle or their pasture can handle or whatever, then they'll choose, or if they want to introduce some new stock, lots of different reasons, they may sell off some of the calves, and then also, raise and sell the actual beef when it's time. So that's can be said, of chickens, of pigs. We don't do goats and sheep, but I mean, there's lots of ways that you can apply that same basic scenario. So there's
Joel
that.
Do that now? He leases land all around him and
Yeah, Joel sells it. Yeah, they lease quite a few farms and field, like a lot, like thousands of acres type deal in the surrounding area. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely can be a very viable way of doing it. Of course, if you're going to do that, like, look at, the lease agreement, the requirements, if you do improvements on the land, there's lots of things and we don't have time to get into that here. And it's going to be a little bit different, per each person's
people
situation.
should check out his book, Your Successful Farm Business, because I think he talks about it in that one if they're interested in doing that. And he talks about how they just saw how much they improved the land he was on, and they realized now that they knew what they're doing, they could do in 5 years what took them like 25 years to do for the land. So Joel has an excellent resource. So definitely check out his books. So that would be number one. And then, of course, with your chickens, there's, of course, selling the eggs, which in Washington State is great. You don't actually have to have any type of egg licensing as long as people are actually just buying them from you. Like the end consumer is coming to your farm and buying them from you. You don't have to have any type of license. If you're selling wholesale to like restaurants or grocery stores, that's where having an egg license comes in. Provided a hard thing to get?
It didn't really look that hard when I was looking at it, but I'm like, we just only sell extra eggs to neighbors. So there was...
You need a lot of eggs to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, you need a lot of chickens and a lot of eggs. Yeah, and so I'm not interested in going... Like, for me personally, I'm like, I'm not really interested in that route. But, the chickens are great because they do so much for the land. Getting them moved around, like excellent fertilizers and keeping bugs and... down. Anyways, they're great. So there's that option. So then of course there's, your meat birds. And again, you can sell, the chicken, the butchered, chicken. Right. And of course, whenever you're selling, you got to look at all of the, depending on how big you want to go and how legal you want to be with it. Like, I'll just leave it at that. So
right.
You do need to look when you're selling meat, if you're butchering it on site to consumers, is there any type of food handling license laws or licensing that needs to be done, et cetera? And that's going to differ from state to state and, country to country. So
sometimes
anyways.
Chickens fall under different rules than like big animals too. I assume because you can process a chicken much faster than a cow in terms of temperatures and things like that. So
getting them chilled down to temperature right away. So
Joel touches on that in that same book too.
Yeah, well, it's different states. Like, so technically in Washington State, if you're considered a small poultry license if it's 1,000 birds or less a year, but you still are supposed to get licensed and have an inspection once a year. Like, there's still stipulations within that. Anyhow, so there's that aspect. And then, for, for selling, of course, like, a cut flower farm, like people love flowers. And so there's, of course, that option. There's actually a lot of flower farms that do very, very well. I mean, you think about like people will spend $20 on a bouquet of cut flowers. And I mean, that's amazing. Like the profit margin on that is really good. And so even if you have a small cut flower area, maybe in your front yard, which is what we did, and I'm not selling cut flowers right now, it's just for own personal use, but think about, again, having different sources of income, but it's even if someone comes to you, so if you've acquired a customer, say someone's coming to you for eggs and they're getting eggs from you, and then you have these really pretty bouquets, they'll just grab and add one on. And so it's always easier in business. Once you have acquired a customer, it's going to cost you a lot less to sell more things to that same customer versus acquiring a brand new customer. So think about that even within just the scope of your backyard. Maybe it's, okay, I've got eggs, but during the summer, I've got extra produce from the garden. And then I've got these cut flowers. And then I've also got extra herbs, or I have a mass production of elderberries this year. I've got extra elderberries that I can sell. So really just look, look around and look and see how many different things that you could offer to the same person or to the small group of people, service them well. And then you can decide, do I want to go any bigger with this?
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, oh man, everybody loves the elderberries. I find them really easy to do. I want to do more, and you expand there. And that's going to kind of differ. And then 2 is when you are looking like at it. So for example, if you're just selling elderberries or blueberries, right, it's going to be a certain usually, cost per pound or volume or whatever. But think about how much more people pay for elderberry syrup versus just bulk elderberries.
Totally.
Blueberry muffins versus
All that value adding.
Yeah. So those are avenues. And again, each of those has different things. If you're doing it as a business, like, do I need to have a commercial kitchen? Is this under cottage law? Is it, blah, 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 things that you'll have to think about. But, and that's something that Joel actually talks about in that book, your profitable farm business.
He does.
It does really well and can really get your brain thinking too. So those are options. And then, like the food that that you're producing, again, like, if you're making sourdough bread, I know a lot of people will do, 5 extra loaves and sell it to neighbors, people in the area. So there's that aspect really that you can kind of carry along down the line with any of the things. And then there's also the whole industry of agritourism, which I know a lot of people think, well, I don't have a really big farm, like that sounds silly, but there's, like, I know with you, Andrea, like, there's also doing where you have people come in and rent a really beautiful, by the way, tent. It's this really pretty tent. It has the wood stove in it, and they come and stay, and it's short-term rental. Like most people, if you say Airbnb, they're like, oh yeah, but it's a short-term rental. You can use different platforms and whatnot. And so there's that aspect that you can do for lodging. A lot of people want to come and experience farm. You can do farm tours. You can also do like teaching classes. So if you're like, I know how to grow elderberries like nobody else, or at least really
Please
good.
call me.
Right? Yeah.
Because I will pay for that class.
Right. Amen. So that might be something where you just teach a class. Like, people want to learn how to grow elderberries and make elderberry syrup. There are things, even with sourdough, like knowing how to truly do traditional sourdough, how to form loaves correctly, how to create tension on that. There's just so many things that we tend to think of, well, I know how to do this. Doesn't everybody? No, they don't.
It's true.
And I think too, a lot of times people in homesteading and farming, especially, we are so giving. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the community. I have to say, like, homesteaders are so eager to share what they know, how they do it. They want everybody to experience the lifestyle because it is so amazing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it is okay to charge money for those things as well. And so you have to balance that, within your own self. But I will say that I heard this for a number of years, and it never really clicked with me until it did. And that is, we value what we pay for. Because you can watch on YouTube for free and learn how to do anything. You really can. You have to sift through a lot. So I hope you have time, and you have to be able to judge, does this person actually know what they're talking about? And that's hard to do when you're a beginner in something, because how do you know if they do or not? You don't have any context yet. But that being said, we are not at a place right now where we have lacking of information on how to do things. But how many things do you want to learn how to do and you've not done them? I have things. I mean,
many.
all of us do.
So many.
But I know if I pay somebody to teach me how to do something, or to take a course on it, or to go take an in-person class, well, buddy, I'm going to get my money's worth, because mama didn't raise no fool. And so if I pay for it, I'm going to do it. And that is true for everybody. Like, we value that. So having a class where you're charging is great, because it's helping you. And I think within the homesteading community, I've never understood this mentality like, well, how dare you charge for that? Really? Like, why wouldn't you want to support people in this community? Like, I don't understand that. Like, I listen to people's podcasts and I watch people's YouTube videos too. And if they have something for sale and it's an area that I'm interested in, I am so happy to support them. Like, I would much rather my money go to people putting out that kind of stuff than, go buy a Mountain Dew from, I
Some
don't even
giant
know what.
corporation or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never really
I
understood that
agree.
mentality. Anyways, but think about that. Think about doing, and what's been great is we actually started doing live chicken butchering workshops here on our farm a couple years ago. That's actually how I met you indirectly, Andrea,
Yeah,
because
that's
Danny
true.
came. And so these are people that are in your local area
Yeah.
and they're wanting to get into this or to further their skill sets. I have met some amazing people. And if I would have never offered those classes, which were for a
Yeah.
fee,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have these awesome people now in my local community. And so Danny and her husband came, is a
Mhm.
dear friend now. We meet for lunch and coffee and text back and forth. I've been to her house numerous times.
Yeah.
And then she introduced me to you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if I had never had that paid class, we wouldn't have now this
Seriously.
community of Homestead sisters in
Yeah.
our geographical location. So
Thank you, Danny.
yes,
Thank
thanks,
you, Melissa,
Danny.
for offering the class.
So I guess I'm saying that because I know a lot of times that people can have a little bit of a stigmatism about offering a class
Mm-mm.
where they're teaching for a fee. They feel like they have
Honestly,
to do
if
it for
I
free.
see somebody's just giving something away, then there's immediately a thought like, well, is it even that good?
Yeah.
If they're just giving it away. But then when I see somebody's charging, when I look at oh my gosh, Brandon's classes.
Oh, Farmstead Meatsmith? Yeah.
Yeah, then I'm like, well, these are like really valuable because it's going to cost $1,000 for me and my husband to go. So I can see how much value he places on them and how he's so convinced that you're going to walk away with this much value that he's willing to charge it. And he knows what his time is worth. And I totally respect that. I agree with you. And I think the same with the camping that people do out here. I've met amazing people who are now just friends, who camped out here and they paid to camp, and it was worth it to them. And they saw that we thought it was worth it for them to pay. Totally love that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I now lost track of my list, but I think we kind of covered at least briefly,
Yeah. Well,
there's
any sort of,
lots of ways.
any sort of, Joel calls it edutainment.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was telling Gary yesterday, I said, most homeschool families, I'm the second of 8 kids raised in a homeschool family, single income household, right? Just my dad worked and my mom stayed home and educated us, right? So, like you said, I never knew we were frugal, but I guess we were, but just didn't know. Um, and I remember saying, like, we never really went out to eat because you don't take 8 kids out to eat. Like, it's just too expensive. And however, I said I do remember my parents shelling out to visit presidential museums or, you know, the Laura Ingalls house in Pepin, Wisconsin, or whatever. Like, homeschoolers, as frugal as we are, we will pay for edutainment for all our kids. Like, we
Yeah.
will, because we value that, the education, the skills, the knowledge, and of course the connection. So I would say, yeah, anything, yeah, like you said, farm tours, classes on, it's weird what people do that we just think everybody cans. So nobody really needs to learn how to can, or I guess they could just learn out of a book, but people don't, people yearn for those face to face, shoulder to shoulder connections. And your chicken butchering class was one of those for Danny, I know. Like, she was feeling so stressed about doing all their chickens, and she said she saw your class and it was pivotal for her. So, and by
Yeah.
extension for me. Now I
and
know you.
and vice versa. Like it's been amazing because we actually are getting ready to open a farm stay house. We bought
Excited
property.
about it.
I'm very excited. In fact, I have to meet some contractors down there today that are putting some things in. So I'm really excited.
Yay.
But it's been great because I've been able to pick your brain. Like it's all
Yeah. Yeah.
we all have value, and it's so great
Right.
to be able to have those relationships, and those
Yeah.
can happen through offering things in your community, because people that value those
Totally.
are going to come for them, and then they probably have
Exactly.
other similar values or have experience in an area that you want to, but you don't yet. So
Yes.
it's not just you being served monetarily, though that is a
Mhm.
great thing and there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But it goes beyond that. And so
Yeah.
I think that's really what I wanted to bring forth in front.
No, I think that that is wonderful. And just get people thinking, what's your niche? What are you good at? And the thing, like you said, if you put it out there, the person who's interested in it, as enough to pay $100 or whatever to take the class, is probably your person, your kind of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Well, Melissa, honestly, I could ask you 150 more questions, but
I know, I just look at the time and I'm like, oh, this is a long episode.
I was like, wait a minute, we just went past an hour. Holy cow. So I'll stop now, but maybe someday a part 2, Melissa. where we
Yeah.
can ask you
Yes,
more
we can
questions.
totally do a part 2.
Before we go, first tell us what is coming out, because I'm so excited about what you have coming out. I
I'm
think
really
right around when
excited.
people hear this episode.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. So I have a new book coming out called Everything Worth Preserving. And it is
Yes.
a preserving book that's not just canning. It's not just any
Mhm.
one type of food preservation. So it covers all the ways that you can preserve food at home, from, of course, canning, water bath, steam canning, pressure canning, dehydrating,
Gosh.
root cellaring, fermenting, freezing. We can use freezers, which
Yeah.
is, cold storage. There's a freeze dryer section, infusion. So using alcohol and vinegars are different ways that we can preserve food as well.
Right.
So the front half of the book goes through each of these methods, like how do they work, must have equipment, nice to have equipment, and
Oh,
safety
nice.
things. Like if, like this is a safety part, do not alter
Right.
this, or this doesn't matter so much, etc. And then what I'm really excited about is the last half of the book is
Okay.
all of your fruits, vegetables, and meat. Alphabetical order. So there's the fruit section,
Yes.
alphabetical order, vegetable, alphabetical order, meat, alphabetical order. And so all you have to do is flip to A for asparagus as example. You've got 20 pounds of asparagus. Bless you, because I love asparagus. But you look at a chart under asparagus and it tells you of all the forms of food preservation, these are the ones that are safe to use for asparagus. So then you can just, if you don't know how to ferment asparagus, you can flip to the fermenting tutorial to learn how to do it. And then underneath that chart is all of my favorite recipes. So my pickled asparagus recipe, or here's how you pressure can asparagus, or ferment, or here's how you, if you need
so
to
amazing.
blanch it, how many minutes do you need to blanch it? If you're going to freeze it, does it even require blanching? Like all of that. So through all of them, I get excited because it's a lot, because it's what I've always wanted. Because I
Yes,
have
me
canning
too.
books, and I love my canning books, and I have
Sure.
fermenting books, and I have freezing. Like
Sure.
I've got a lot of the books, and I love them. But I'm like, I want everything in one place, and I want to
One-stop
know,
shop.
that when I've got broccoli, because you're not supposed to can broccoli.
Ugh.
So how do I free? Like
No,
how
you
do
really
I freeze?
shouldn't.
Right? Yeah, it's not desirable. There's a
don't,
reason on that
don't.
one. Sometimes it's safety, and sometimes it's you will not like it.
This is both.
It's both. So I'm like, I wanted a book because I'm like, whenever everything's coming in, I want to know at a glance what and how can I do
Yes.
with this. I don't want to have 10 different books to go through each method and look through all 10 of these. I don't have time for that. So I really created the book
Yeah.
that I wanted
No.
and was unable to find. And so I'm super, super excited. So yes, it is coming out. It's on pre-order right now. And the cool thing is, if you do pre-order, you get the paperback copy and you get the digital copy for free.
Nice.
And there's some other fun bonuses, and I can't say what they are yet, but there will be some more bonuses that come out if you have pre-ordered. You will automatically get as
way.
well. We're
I've
just still
already
working out.
pre-ordered.
We're already working out
so
the
can't
details,
wait.
so I can't say yet because they're not all quite in
Official.
place. Yes.
Yeah. Where do people go to either pre-order or place their order depending on when they hear this?
Yeah. So go to melissaknorris.com and you'll see the little shop book, and you'll just click on Everything Worth Preserving there. And I'll also send Andrea Andrea has the link because she ordered. Thank you. But I'll send her the link so
I can link it.
You can put
link it
in the show notes. Yeah.
And when you said this, I literally took a step back. How many pages is this book?
459.
What? Like, this is a family heirloom going on the shelf for generations. I feel like this is gonna go up next to Sally Fallon. This kind of,
Oh my, that is high
when
praise. I hope so, but I would never.
well, when people say to me, which book? And I'm like, just get Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions because it covers everything.
Yeah.
So if you need one book on how to do, a bunch of different foods, there you go. And this is going to be the preserving one. You just want one book to do, because a lot of people, it is a space issue, or a cost, by the time you buy 12 books, $20 each or whatever, you've racked up a bill.
Yeah.
So
What
one book that covers.
And I don't know about you, but with the canning, especially, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my jams and jellies and
Sure.
fruits, but I didn't want a book that was 90% different
I know.
types of fruits and jellies just by adding in some
Yes.
vanilla or weird spice that I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
I wanted the foods that we actually used and ate in our
Yes.
everyday cooking and our everyday meals from
I
what we had
agree.
preserved, just not some, an exotic, pretty something or another. So
So much of canning books. People show me canning books all the time, and I'm like, I mean, it's lovely, but it's all boutique sort of specialty things like you might give for Christmas, but not really
Yeah.
what I'm stocking my pantry with. And I think that comes from a culture of people learning how to can who aren't thinking in terms of, I don't go to the grocery store anymore. I grow or I buy it from my neighbor Melissa K Norris, and then I can it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They're not thinking like that. Did you say there was meals in here too? I'm trying to remember what you said.
Yeah, so we have in the back section where we've got some different like meals in a jar, and then I also have
Cool.
recipes like here you have a jar of canned chicken and you have a jar of canned green beans. How do you use these individual jars to create
Oh.
a meal?
Oh,
So we
I
have
love it.
we have a section on that, and then there is we've got like a chicken pot pie in a jar, which of course does
Oh.
not have flour or pie crust in it or anything like that. Like it does follow
The rules.
the rules, yes, because
That's good.
that's the way that I can
If we're
and
going to be
preserve
hazardous,
food.
let us do it on our own time.
Yeah.
not
So
out of your book.
yeah, but so then it shows you like, okay, this is the canned, this is where it's canned, and then beneath that it says, okay, to make this into the pot pie, here's what you do.
I'm sold immediately. I want it just for that. I'm glad I already bought it.
I am too.
Melissa, will you sign my copy, please?
Of course, I will sign your copy, friend.
Yeah, and I want to get a mug too, so I can literally be drinking out of the mug while I'm reading the book.
Okay, you are super fun. We will make it happen.
It's gonna happen. Okay, where else can people go to find you? Just give us that before we go.
Yeah. Really, if you go to melissaknorris.com, my website, you will see the podcast, you'll see the YouTube, like you will see all the things. Plus, I believe there's literally over 600 blog posts now.
Jeez.
They're all categorized. So if you're like,
Well,
I want the cooking, I want the gardening, I
Yeah.
want the whatever, it's very easy to navigate, but there's a plethora of information there.
There really is, guys. Go check it out. Yes. Joel Salton said something about this once, and you said something to me about this once. There's so many people out there who look really good on the internet, but they really don't know what they're doing, or they've been doing it for a year, which I love their confidence in that they're sharing immediately what they know. But you've really been racking up the experience points. I mean, you've been out here since you were a kid, basically doing this. So your stuff is very solid.
Oh, thank you. And I'm with you. Like, I do enjoy following people's journey, like as they're learning. And I think that there's
Totally.
value in that to
Oh,
see
yes.
somebody's journey
So
as a
much.
beginner. But there's also things that I realize, 10 years into something, that there's certain things you only learn from doing a very long time. And it's just because you haven't had enough time to be presented with some of those obstacles
Yeah.
that can come later. It's not that, that they're giving bad advice
No.
or anything like that.
No.
It's just there's certain things, like, I mean, even myself, now that we've butchered and raised chickens for 10 years, there's a lot of stuff that first year I just hadn't encountered yet
Yeah.
to have
Oh, yeah.
the wisdom from.
Yeah. And I mean, in the scheme of things, I'm a very new to not so new to food preservation and things like that, but as far as farming goes, I'm brand new to this, and I'm just learning from you and Joel and the people, just watching, and it is exactly like you said. There's things that Joel Salatin said that I was like, huh, I don't understand. Why would you say this? And then a year later, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
Joel is
sense.
just a fount of wisdom. Like
He's literally
It,
faithful.
it is. I just oh gosh, this sounds bad. I know Joe personally, and he is the same in person. Like I just am like, I'm just like, just talk, Joel. Like, just
Yeah.
talk. I'll
That's how I
just sit
feel
here
about
and
you.
listen. Just talk.
That's how I feel about you. Just talk.
You're so
Just tell
sweet.
me things. Yeah. Well, speaking of just talk, 6 hours could go by and I wouldn't realize it. So I better let you go so you can go work on the house because I want to come stay in it ASAP. So please get it done.
Yes, we will. We'll have to have like a dedication ceremony and
Oh, a
people.
grand
That'd be fun.
opening.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Short-term rental warming.
Right? Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what you call it, but yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Melissa. This was just nothing but pleasure, start to finish. Have an amazing morning. What time is it? It's morning. Have a great
Still
morning.
You too. Okay. Thanks, Andrea.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Allison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.